it and take notes later.
That's
So,
great. I frequently ask permission to do so for the same reason, so I could send it, to individuals and then store it. But since you're doing it, we're all good. So you'll have it, and then if any other questions come up, when we're done, Bob, I'll send you out some reports, and I hope to get that out to you today. And if I don't, I'll get it out to you soon.
okay.
So that's fine. Yeah. So we'll start. Oh, you're recording now. So what I just want to be able to say to begin with, when you see me go through the explanation of the data, it's my algorithms. So what that means is I'm going to take the scores and I'm going to interpret them, based upon, 35 years of experience of what I'm doing. Unfortunately, the reports that you're going to receive have been standardized on, the individual who's done the testing in the first place. So you're going to get isolated pieces of data. This is true about this, that kind of thing, but they won't make the inferences that I'm going to make. So I think always go back and take a look. And clearly, I'm always available to follow up with any questions that you have.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Sure. I just the spirit in which I did this was just trying to be as objective as I humanly can, and you can't not think through with your own filter, of course.
That's right.
So recognize that that's going on, but I wasn't trying to game it in any way.
I would tell you if you were trying to game it. Okay, I can tell that. I can tell when people are not telling the truth,
Uh-huh.
when they're gaming it.
Okay.
Do you know Stuart Spencer or Spencer Stewart? You know that recruiting company?
No.
They're a pretty big company. And so I met with one of the high level guys and he took the test and I said, "You were testing me on this, right?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You were trying to find out if I could tell whether or not you were falsifying the data. You didn't tell the truth." And so he could tell that. And I can tell you many stories of when people do this. You have to give me permission to share my screen.
Sure. Absolutely. Oh, I have to give you permission. All right. Let
Yeah,
me see. How do I do
literally.
that?
Yeah, you just go to share and then it'll say other participants or something
Yeah.
like
Let
that.
me see more. Make co-host. There you are.
There you go. That should be it.
Okay.
Okie dokie. So, well, first of all, again, thanks for the opportunity, and let's get started on the data. So, can you see 4 columns of numbers?
Hmm.
And is the last one down at the bottom here, say distractibility on the right bottom?
Yep.
Okay. And so you can see my cursor moving around on here as well.
Yep.
All right. So the first thing I do is rule out what you just said to me. Um, you explained that you told the truth. And I told you that I could tell from a veracity scale built into this. You saw that it presented the same data over and over and over again, a number of times to see whether or not you were going to say it, whether it's negative or positive. But then there are other factors in the scoring that also helps us understand that. So we look at things like distractibility or anxiety. They're very low to below the norm. That didn't confound the results. You're not overly self-critical. That didn't confound the results. And your expression of frustration, not just anger or stress in your life, didn't bias the results. So I can tell from just looking at the way in which you took the test, to me, it seems a valid explanation about the way in which you assessed your own performance.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
so now we're going to begin. The first thing that we look at is understanding what's called your attentional style. And there's 3 elements to your attentional style. And those are awareness. I'll explain all of these. Your analytical conceptual process and your action focus. And we can see that of those 3, that your analytical conceptual score is something that you relate to. Now, knowing your background, I can understand that because of the science and well, I know that you have an MBA as well, but within your engineering background and that kind of thing, this is what we expect to see with individuals that are highly analytical. So we got that. So the 72, and what I'm saying is that if you are ever in a position where you're guessing or questioning rather your explanation, you'll just continue to analyze the data. You won't actually have to go out and get more data because what you know is that the data that you've gathered is sufficient. So your awareness here tells us that you are externally aware of things that are going on in the world around you, and you're internally aware. And I'll explain how I know that from another score in a few moments. So you really don't miss a thing. And if there's irrelevant data, why spend time with it? You will analyze it, and your action focus is a little lower. Now, is that a good sign? Well, if I told you one of the top financial companies in the world, your score is above theirs in terms of action focus, because what they've learned is once they've done the analysis, they don't have to be focused on things anymore because they can make their decision. And that's what you do. So your style intentionally is gather the information, but kind of narrow it down because you don't need things that are irrelevant. Analyze the heck out of it, stay focused on it for a long enough period of time, and this is your decision making speed. Make a decision quickly and move on. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think so.
A little bit different than a Myers-Briggs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, your external distractibility is very low. How many people, report to you?
Right now, no one, just myself.
Okay. Well, in the past, when you were in a position, did you have other people reporting to you?
Oh yeah, a couple thousand.
Okay. All right. So if you were using a similar style in your leadership, it meant that you didn't micromanage people, that this is a reflection of open-mindedness. So there was an open door policy, and you gave people the opportunity to come to you whenever they needed to, but you didn't have to go out and observe them over and over and over again. You would even allow them to fail, because in their failing, they would learn what to do.
Right.
You hold them to a high standard as you hold yourself to a high standard. Again, you would not get any of that information from any of the tests that you're doing. But so we can assess part of your leadership style here and part of your management style because of that score. You don't get internally distracted. So what this means, if there are events that are going on outside of your responsibilities as a leader in industry, you would be able to compartmentalize any of those stressors. So whether it had to do with health issues or family issues or the future, you could remove any of those distractions because of either the faith and trust in your abilities to allow people to discover what they needed to do, and things that were not relevant to your decision making weren't going to be included internally. And this is your reduced flexibility score. And so, in psychological terms, that means open mindedness and fluidity of thinking. And so, you're a very fluid thinker, very quick with analysis, very in depth in terms of gathering the information. And then once you're done, move on so it doesn't influence you any longer. That's what I think.
That sounds right.
Okay. Any questions about this top section?
No.
Okay. Okay, this is your preference. So information processing is a preference of whether you like to multitask or do things one at a time. You don't sit still. So either you are analyzing, reading, gathering data, doing something with it, or being physically active. Probably not so much a couch potato, but making sure that there's things in your life, even on a daily basis, to keep yourself active. That's your preference. And I would expect to see you building sandcastles on the beach, even when there's no children there.
Well, I don't know about that.
um, this is your orientation to rules and risks. So you're very conservative. You won't take unreasonable risks. And the protocol for what you believe in, your value system, and your responsibilities to organization, to people, you won't deviate from that, and that you're very much, affected by the protocol, uh, wherever that comes from. So if it's self-induced, or if you have responsibilities to others, whatever those dynamics are, you can be assured you're going to follow them.
Mm-hmm.
Anything about these two numbers?
No, that's right. I am very values based orientation so that if I have values, I follow them.
Right. It's integrated in you, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I'm telling you we could figure this out just from the data. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at your leadership style. And your leadership style here is you desire to be a leader, but you never want to be in a spotlight. So, in spite of the fact that things might be different for you now because of the stage of your career, that even when you may have been more active in it, um, you would be a leader. You like to assume responsibility, but you don't take responsibility for everything. You want to make sure that people that are responsible also are acknowledged. You'll take responsibility for yourself. If there's something that wasn't effective under your watch, you will respond to that with the assumption of you're not being correct. But you don't have to have your hand waving in the air. That's what I think here.
And I do, I am very much a person that enjoys the spotlight, though.
You don't use it to make the judgments. You don't use it in your leadership style. That's what I think. And maybe things have changed,
Well,
but
that's true. I will let people make their mistakes and let people think for themselves. But when I have an opportunity to be in the spotlight and speak, I'm not reticent at all.
well, I'll show you where those scores are. We didn't get there, but I'll show you where we picked that up. You're very much a person,
Okay.
a people person.
Yeah.
So high introversion, and your expression of
Extroversion.
extroversion,
Yeah.
and your high expression of ideas.
Okay.
So you'll walk into the room. Bob's here.
Yeah.
Friendly, glad handing, remembering things about people from the first time you met them, kind of sharing them, telling stories. I expect that from you.
Yeah. Okay.
I also expect that when you're in the middle of responsibilities, participating in whatever capacity, either as a leader or as a participant, you do something very interesting. You listen to people. You make sure that they know that you're listening to them because you value them. So you won't be answering questions unless you've used all the data that you can in terms of gathering it, not just from your own observations, but from other people and making sure that they know that you've been listening to them. Accurate?
Yep.
Try to find that on another test. You won't see that. So I jumped over there because of your comments about that.
Okay.
So, but your leadership style is, we're going to get through the rest of the pieces of that. So, um, you are a very strategic leader. You like to be driven by data. You like to be able to impart it and share it. We've seen this here already. You like to do that, and you're a cheerleader. So in your support, you try to help people feel good about themselves. And in your critical leadership, which is a perfect score, it says that if someone has not done what they were supposed to do, a subordinate has not done that the way they were supposed to, you will encounter them. It won't be confrontational. And you'll be listening to them and making sure from an empathic perspective that you're taking into consideration how to respond to them. Accurate?
Yeah. Try to be that way. I can be reactive though at times.
Well, look, you're a passionate man. I can tell from that. You're a very passionate guy. And, you have a lot of resources for the data, just about in your background, let alone your leadership experiences. So you're authentic, very active in the mix,
Yeah.
hands-on,
Right.
but not over controlling or dominating or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's right.
Pretty accurate?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm
Self-confidence is a very,
relating
yep.
some of these comments to. In fact, I was just on a board meeting this morning with a nonprofit and I'm the chair of the board, and it's called Elevate Rochester. We celebrate ethical cultures, and we run an ethics contest every year,
Oh,
and give awards out. And so that's where I was this morning with about 30 people on the board of directors of that organization, and it's a lot of work. I do I that very much into it up to my eyeballs.
Yeah. Well, that's not stopping unless you decide that you want to. The stuff I'm telling you, and we'll talk a little bit about what's called traits or states, and traits are very resistant to change, and states are, factors that are occurring like COVID, things in our environment. So I'm telling you a lot of your traits at this state in your life, and they're so reliable and predictable, and that's one of the reasons why this is it's a great prognostic indicator for high levels of performance. Confidence is not a good predictor of performance, so we'll leave that alone. You don't seem to knock people down in the hallway or when you're going to your board meetings. You're not physically competitive, and you've talked about really not being so interested in sports. And this is your decision-making speed. Now, because you are so, I'm going to talk to you about self-reliance. Because you're so self-reliant, and you don't miss a piece of data, you analyze the heck out of it. You rely on other people to give you information that you might not need, that you might not have rather, and that you don't get distracted. And because you're open-minded, and because you won't take, unreasonable risks, your decision-making speed is very quick. What do you think?
For the most part, I think that's right. I think there are some situations where I um, will be seeking out more data before making a decision.
Right, and that's what this 99 is about. Is that if you don't have the data, you're not going to make the decision. What this says is, generally speaking, when you're under pressure, you're going to consider the data that you need.
Yeah.
You're not going to consider data that's not. So let's liken this to an ER doc. And, someone comes in who's bleeding, broken bones, and can't breathe. You're going to say, let's make sure they're breathing. And, you take care of the bleeding, you take care of the broken bone, but I'm going to make sure the guy's breathing. And you don't need a lot more information in order to make that. So when you're under pressure, what it tells us is that you're going to formulate the data that's necessary. And then obviously, if you need more data, you will rely on people that you trust to give you that data. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can say that we may have missed so far?
No, I think I think it's right. That's the way I operate.
Good. Okay, so now we're going to talk about introversion, extroversion. This is not how social you are. This is your social needs. You love people, you love being active with people, and I love having a good time. And you can be in large groups and speak in large groups, and you can be in small groups. You're very fluid, flexible. Obviously, the intellectual prowess and all the things that you've learned, is always available to you. But so because of this introversion, extroversion, people get confused about this. Now, I'm going to tell you is a little complication in the explanation, and this is my algorithm. These scores are Fortune 500 execs. I don't think I put you. If I think I didn't put you in the CEO category. I can change the norms; it won't be that different. But why would we expect some higher degree of introversion? Well, the absence of this means the presence of it. The absence of being at the normal level means the presence of it. So what this says is that you're a high introvert. Introversion psychologically means you're extremely self-reliant. You're gritty. You don't need a lot of positive reinforcement to continue to move you through what you're doing. So if you're making a decision that's not necessarily favored by others, you don't need to make people like you. You will know that if the decisions that you're making are based upon something that's not necessarily what the majority of people are saying, it's because there's something that you're relying, which I would believe is your intuition and your grittiness. And so I think that your introversion score is around a 45, if not a 60, somewhere in that range. But you don't like to, you say you don't mind being kind of like the center of attention. When you're decision making, it's not me, 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 me. It's not about Bob doing that. It's about your self reliance that when you make a decision, it's got to pass the Whipple test. It's got to say, this is what the truth is. That's what I think that means.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All that from a little number 11. um,
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive. You would
right.
think that a lower number means less.
Well, it does, except for my algorithm. And having done this with, I mean, so even when Nideford put the norms out many years ago, I have much more experience in the normative base when he first did this. And so here's what we do in corporations. So we go into a company, we take the top performing individuals. We're doing this for a company now. It's 43 different companies and presidents, and we've evaluated them. And I've been able to come up with the plan for this industry and what the norm is for them versus financial industry and specific companies. And then we go in, we look at teams as well. So, but I can tell you that when I see scores like this, I know that in spite of the fact that you have no problem being in the limelight, what I mean, what I think that that means to me is you take responsibility. It's not bad about being in the spotlight, but you don't need it to make decisions. You're not going to try to please people to make the decision.
Right. That's right.
And that's part of the grit here. So the absence of this means the presence. You don't like to tell people that about yourself. They'll know it over a period of time, but it's never something that's worn on your sleeve. Expression of ideas were already explained. Any question about that now, Bob?
No.
Expression of ideas, you're verbal, um, can mix it up with anyone. And you know, it's not just your intellectual prowess. We're going to get into your creativity and your intuition. This score, when Bob Nidifer, who was a Rochester grad, he when he was looking at this, he initially called it anger. Now he describes it as stress. And so what this says is that you have a high stress tolerance. No matter what's going on, then pretty cool as a cucumber in stressful situations. That's what it says. And if you're frustrated or annoyed, it wouldn't interrupt or be present within you. You would tell the truth, but it wouldn't be as manifested, you know, kind of like so you can see it in other people's faces. Pretty much that wouldn't be the case with you. Cheerleader, we already talked about it. Self-critical. Now, when we look at these two scores, introversion and self-critical scores, we're looking for a way of finding out your self-reflection and your self-awareness. So these scores of 32 and 35 make it very easy for us to see that a person who has those scores is also reflecting on himself. However, in the Molinaro interpretation of this, the absence of those scores being at the norm reflects the presence, but you don't let people know about that. It's just the way in which you manage your life. So you are very self reflective, you are a self investigator, hold yourself to high standards, and take a look at, you know, how you've done your jobs. And you'll do that with frequency without sharing that with people. What do you think?
Hmm. I can
Your
see
fo-
myself there. Yeah.
yep. Your focus over time is above the norm, half for standard deviation. And how come that's significant? Well, we know that people that multitask tend to get bored pretty quickly. In your situation, even if it's a boring routine, but it has value, could be boring, have value, right? Versus boring routines that have no value. But if it's boring, if it has value, you're going to stick with it. That's part of your grittiness, and that's part of the way in which you process your attention as well. You can remain focused for a period of time. Your performance under pressure, this is your self analysis. This is not an accurate reflection, but it's the way in which you see yourself. And because you have a style that kind of minimizes your self importance, you kept it at the norm. I know that your performance under pressure is even higher than that, but you don't talk about that with other people. Not egocentric. You would never be narcissistic, generous, caregiving, altruistic. Those are the things. I mean, you told me a little bit about what you're doing, but I would have made the assumption from about that from the scores that we've seen so far.
Uh-huh.
So these are the basics scores, and that these are now what Nidifer came up about his kind of algorithm. So you've heard some of my algorithmic processes of these things. Confidence, again, is not a good predictor of performance. This score is a much better predictive. Grit and self reliance, you have them. This score is a prognostic indicator. Now, it's a construct. It is psychological energy. It's not physical energy. So, as a clinician, investigator, analysis of top performing individuals, this score is so significant because it tells me, if we were going to help Bob with anything, let's say we wanted him to be even more other directed, if there was a score like that there, I would say, oh, his psychological energy says you give him an assignment, he has the wherewithal to do it, whatever those areas are. So let's say we wanted to increase your risk taking. And we'd say, and you might say, you're not sure you needed to do that. You would be open minded. We know we'd have the discussion. But I also know that if your position required more risk taking, I know that we could have the discussion and help you see, options that you would have. So that's a very, very important prognostic indicator. You're not competitive with other people. The competition's within you. You hold yourself to a high standard. So that's all that that says. Extroversion,
Well,
people person.
there are
Yeah.
some people that I ruminate about uh, being in competition with other authors, for example, um, that I struggle with. I don't respect as much as I probably should.
I guess that's interesting to see maybe in terms of competition. And I'm not just trying to make the picture, rosy here. Clearly, you're not going to miss anything, or you're going to analyze the heck out of anything. So, in that kind of comparison, I think you would look at this in terms of a truth. I don't think it keeps you up and that you have to be better than that person. If you see that someone is being recognized for things that are false, my guess, because your value system would influence that, and that I think is a right and wrong, good and bad thing, which is based upon the protocol stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't. I would say to myself, this guy's a jerk, or he's
well,
acting like a jerk, or he's
well,
writing
that's
like.
okay. But
But I wouldn't say that to anybody else.
no, and that's all I'm saying is that first, clearly you would follow the protocol. You're not going to miss the thing. You're going to analyze it. You might see as that as being more competitive. I would say that that's truth telling. That I don't think I think that the competitive spirit about you is about excelling at whatever the resources that you have. So whether it's your analysis or your authoring or whatever that is, you're in competition to do the best that you can. When you
Yeah,
see other people that are not doing that and that are getting recognition for it in maybe a way that's falsified and it is not appropriate according to, what the truth is, I think that that could irritate you. I
yeah.
think it's a values issue much more than anything else.
Okay.
That's the way I would explain it. And since you're open minded and I'm never wrong, I'm sure you can consider that. I'm only kidding about never being never wrong. Well, my wife keeps reminding me of that, but in any case. So, any question about that now, that competitive piece?
No.
Extroversion, life of the party, that kind of stuff. People like you like people. This is, I started explaining this before. And I'm sure even as a board, chairman of the board, president, you can delegate responsibilities to others, not assume too much responsibility because everybody has to carry their own weight because you have a high standard. If a person is not performing where they need to be, as I mentioned, you would encounter them, wouldn't be confrontational. You could be very direct with them, but you would do it in a very compassionate, empathic way. And because you're passionate by things that you're going to spend energy doing, and it looks like there's many of those things, that kind of value system, if you had to select people, they would have to pass, the Whipple test up here.
Right. I have a model of holding people accountable in a principle-centered way, such that it enhances the relationship rather than destroys the relationship. And I know how to do that, and I have a model that I use to do that.
And it's part of your trust thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But we hopefully we have time to talk about trust and faith because those things are very different.
Yeah.
And I'd like to have a brief discussion with you about that. Okay, the absence of the score means the presence. So um, higher scores of anxiety don't necessarily mean nervousness, worrisomeness. But the absence is telling me the presence is that you are forward thinking. You look at any of the impact of your decision making and your responsibilities, not just now, but into the future. Now, one of the ways you do that is through a creative process and also intuition. Now, intuition, the definition of which are my words, knowing without knowing how you know. And it's not a gut response. People call it a gut response. Those responses are not trustworthy. Those are actually physiological. It's based upon serotonin changes in the intestine and serotonin in the brain, and it's a more kind of emotional response. Intuition is a pure cognitive process, and it requires the gathering of data or having a database and drawing upon it very quickly and making decisions without having to spend much time, doing the things that one typically has to do. So it's called a heuristic process. It looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. You don't have to go over that. You're done, move on. And there's many things in what you do in your leadership where you can gather that data and do it from that perspective. Now, the creative piece, and there's much more creativity inside of you than you probably even know about. Not sure you're interested in exercising it, but I'm sure there's more creativity.
Yeah, the creativity has been instilled in me by my father, who taught creativity around to organizations around the country,
Wow.
and taught morphological analysis and stuff like that. So I some of it rubbed off on me.
Well, what I would say to you is that it's inherent in you. So when you look at the process of creativity and intuition, those are inborn predispositions. So just like someone who might have the ability to do math, such as yourself, more analytical, left brain stuff, and people that are creative have an inborn predisposition. And so I'm sure your father helped develop it as a model,
Yeah.
and whatever appreciation of the relationship that you enjoyed with your dad, it may have fostered that, but it was an inherent predisposition. So
Was always in our family is was always what else will do the job. And we had the Whipple task force that me and my brothers and my dad would sit outside and drinking brandy and smoking cigars and talk about the universe, how does the universe works, and what invent things. We would invent things.
yeah. Well, I know you're a Renaissance man, and so other obviously being in your company a little bit, so I get a sense of your humor and your wit and the vastness of your intellect and the knowledge that you have. But from the score, I would make the inference that that is so available to you, and you don't push it in anybody else's face. It's kind of quietly ever running like like an operating system in the background, like an Apple computer, being able to do a whole bunch of different things
Yeah,
in addition to analysis.
it's a curiosity to it's. I'm a maximizer,
Yeah.
so it's a curiosity of saying, okay, what there, if we wanted to look at this from another angle, and come up with a better solution, what might that look like? And I'm always curious about, are we near the optimum, or are we fooling ourselves going down a rabbit hole?
Right. Well, I'm sure there's challenges. I mean, you're not just a black and white thinker, which is not usual for people with strong scientific backgrounds like yours, except when you look at this guy, you may know him, Da Vinci. You've ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Well, he was one of those kinds of guys, right? He could do left brain, right brain kind of thing. So you're Da Vinci-esque in that regard. Is that you're going to be challenging things and seeing other ways to come to solve them. And that's part of what you've done with your kind of creative process. But you're a Renaissance man, those scores tell me that. And so then, one or two more things about intuition. So knowing without knowing how you know. So did I give you the example of who's a more intuitive person, a fireman or a fighter pilot? I don't think I gave you that
No,
example,
I
right?
didn't know. We didn't talk
Okay.
about that.
Okay. So who's more intuitive, a fighter pilot or a fireman?
I would say a fighter pilot.
You're wrong for once in your life, Bob, but I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that. And so that's what I said too. And so now that I have the answer, I won't ever say that again. But so when you look when you look at fighter pilots, they use this program called the OODA: Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And if you see these four components, each one of them brings them back to the one before and all the way back to the first one, because they cannot afford to have a memory of a previous experience because they'd be dead.
Yeah.
They have to be so present in the moment. So they don't use the older database of what happened in previous fights, but a fireman does. And so I got tricked by that. But then I started learning all of this, about intuition, because I made that error. But also, I was working in a corporation. They said to me, "Oh, this guy's been with you for about 4 or 5 months. Nothing's changing." And so, how come? So clearly it couldn't be me. So I said, I don't think the guy's very intuitive. And they said, oh, okay. And then I realized I better be able to prove that. So I went on to search for being able to assess intuition. It's been a long time since I studied it. And I wind up studying with a South African psychologist about the intuitive process. And I took the test, and I'm very intuitive in psychology, but I can't find my way out of Rochester or New York City. And so I don't, my intuition doesn't get generalized. I just know how to use the data that I have, which helped me understand that you have to have a strong database in order to be intuitive. Now, individuals that are creative have a database of, other things too. And that's part of what you do. So when I was looking at the 55 and saw that you have to stay focused very long because you have a very quick heuristic. Kahneman's thinking fast, thinking slow. That's really what it's kind of based on, that kind of process. Your distractibility score is very low. I'm not concerned about the absence and the presence of this here. It just means that this external distractibility is, if you needed to modify the energies or time spent with other individuals that are not coming to see you, you would find out about that, and then you would go out and make sure you talk to them. That's what that score means.
Seek
So
them out.
yeah, that's what you would do. So that's the magic of the Molinaro method.
Cool.
What do you think?
I think it's very interesting.
Is it accurate? That's the most important thing. How accurate do you
Well,
think it is?
let's, if answering the questions was me giving my impression of me,
Right.
then it ought to be pretty accurate
Okay.
according to me.
Well, but according to the research, and I can tell you, having done this for all these years, when I go into a corporation and I help them with succession planning, and in one of the companies I'm working with, there's a 95% retention rate. In that company, prior to that, it certainly wasn't that high. And every one of that company it's an accounting firm, there's over 200 accountants. Every intern has gone through this. And the predictions that have come as a result of this, even with people that were there that are no longer there, have been very accurate. So I would agree with you. And you look at any test, it can be subjective. But what we've been able to do with this is be able to identify, both in terms of hiring, and then and viewing where we think people would have the potential in terms of their development, and then in succession planning, certainly clearly for the future. But we're working with some very large companies with very major decisions that they're going to be making, very costly, and they would attest to this. This is so accurate.
Fascinating.
So that's what we do.
Cool.
Any questions about the testing?
Not really. No,
Okay. So the other stuff that we do is that we take this and we would go into a company. And then if we were doing succession planning, we would find the top performers and then the people that are being considered. And then we would do the analysis based upon our analysis of the top performers. So that now becomes the standard. So when we look at for succession planning, we now have a database that is a highly predictive indicator about which should be those individuals. And in the industries that we've been in, finance, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, have been very accurate.
What would be, now that you know me so well, what would be the three things that I could focus on in order to improve my overall performance?
Well, we'd have to take a look at what you mean by performance and understanding it's a generic process. I mean, clearly, you're not missing very much. And I don't think that you have to demonstrate to others these other qualities. Risk taking is always an interesting concept. You take a risk if you don't take a risk, you take a risk if you do. Are there other opportunities that maybe you're not taking advantage of in terms of more risk taking? So to me, it would be an investigation into what this for actually means. Now, if you're a compliance officer, you want to make sure that you're ultra conservative, engineering, so when you see all that kind of data stuff, but you are a creator, you are an inventor. And so what I'm saying is, are there other opportunities for you to use your risk taking? And what does that mean? Was it risk taking in terms of finances or investments? It could be. Is risk taking at this stage of your life, developing other aspects that you've not really seen very much yet? So my what I would do if there was an engagement is to look at, are there things that are kind of holding you back from taking other risks, and also using more of your creativity. Those would be the two things that I'd be looking at.
Hmm. Okay, let me share with you the
Sure.
process that I use. It's coming up here in just a few days, a few weeks. I do this process on New Year's Eve
Oh,
every year. I've been doing it for about 20 years. I start out the day going over my calendar for the previous year and documenting how I accomplished what I accomplished and how well I did against my goals.
okay.
That takes me a few hours, and then I start ideating about what I sort of do a SWOT analysis and find out how am I feeling now. And by the way, I'm starting now to do the process, but this all comes together on the New Year's Eve day.
Wow.
And I think it's about an 80-page PowerPoint, I think in pictures. So I have about an 80-page PowerPoint presentation that takes me through all of my assumptions, all of my values,
Wow.
all of my what, and then I do a force field analysis where I ideate about potential alternative things that I might do. This is where the risk comes in.
Okay.
And so I make some decisions about what would be the of the alternative paths that I've got. I mean, I could go and teach more. I could write another book. I could,
Right.
speak more. Whatever. Go back to a corporate job. I'm too old for that. But anyway, I take all of that 80-page analysis, and then I distill it onto one page, and it looks like this. It's got my purpose, my vision, and my mission. And these generally don't change very much. I document my values, and they spell light: loyalty, integrity, generosity, honesty, and trust. Those are my 5 values, and they don't change. They
Right.
haven't changed in the last, say, 10 years. I also have document the behaviors that I hold myself accountable for. Things like cleaning out my inbox, getting my inbox down to 0 twice a week.
Yeah.
How quickly I respond to people. I'm a fast responder because you're one
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
So I do that, and then I take and document the five, you're generally five, not more than six, but generally five strategies for the next year. These are the strategic things that I'm going to try to accomplish. Identify how I'm going to try to accomplish. What am I going to do? And then I create the measures which I'm going to go back and check myself. Um, how am I doing? Okay, that's so. What does it say here? Measure on this strategy here. Leverage national reputation. I'm going to try to get 6,000 hits per month back to my blog. Well, that was my goal. In November, I got 19,000. So that's how I run my life.
Yeah.
I run my life on a forward thinking plan, and it allows me to not do some things that are tempting.
Yeah.
Because or at least question if something comes along that's really tempting and it's not on my plan. I gotta say, and my wife would say, read your plan. So that's how I do a very conscious activity, and then I laminate the thing. I make about 10 copies and I laminate it, and I carry them around with me all year. I show it to customers, I show it to friends and people, and because that explains what I'm trying to do.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Is that in any of your books?
It's in a lot of articles that I've written.
Oh, if you
I
could,
call it renewal.
if you can, send information to me about, where I could read that. And not that you need to be busying yourself with anything else, but it'd be glad to refer people to you. I mean, just what I'm saying about what you can do in terms of that kind of information and your forward thinking, the actual process. So I'd be glad to try to get people to understand what you're doing. This is amazing. Clearly, I'm not saying it's just to, make you feel good. You and I are cut out of the same cloth in a lot of ways in terms of values.
Right.
What you've said in the last, 5 or 10 minutes is an amazing analysis and a process that is so clear about how to get people to go to next steps. So I'd really like to look that over.
Yeah, my thesis is if you do an organized process of planning, and it doesn't need to have that same format. It can take any number of different physical ways of representing it.
Sure.
But if you go into that depth and say, like, who's on my mastermind group? You know, I believe in the concept of a mastermind group, and who's there and why and how is it changing, and who do I want to put on my mastermind group and who do I want to take off my mastermind group. I think of all those things, and 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 uh, and I maintain if you do something like that, an organized process, you make twice the progress in life than you otherwise would if you didn't have that specificity.
Right. Thank you very much. It was very, very clear. Would you also mind, could you send me a copy of this recording? Would that be okay with you?
Sure.
Because I'd like to review some things that you said. Um, in the kind of shortened version, and not my model, it's a simple outcome goals, things that are into the future measured against, some kind of normative group. I want to be the best, whatever, in the county or in a corporation. Performance goals. What are the things that can be measured with frequency, daily basis, weekly, and then process goals? What do I have to do daily in order for those things to take place?
Hmm.
And then I use a measure called FE, focused effort, which at the end of the day, when you look at what you've been able to, what you have responsibilities to, what was the focused effort that you put on that? And clearly, if you're below an 8, then you're not utilizing your resources.
Hmm.
So my system isn't so sophisticated with all the things that you're doing over data gathering for a year. I'm looking that over, but so we have systems that help us get to where we need to be.
Hmm.
It's very, very profound. Good. Thank you.
Well, you got to satisfy yourself.
Yeah.
We only get 90 years or so on the planet, and I call it enjoy your wiggle.
Enjoy.
I'll send you that article too in Wiggle. The idea is this: if you go up in space and look down, we appear to be like little worms. We appear on the planet and we wiggle around for 80 or 90 years, and then we're gone.
Right.
And you really need to pay attention that you're getting the most out of your wiggle, because you only get it once.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, I knew you were creative. I didn't, and I knew that you were funny, but I didn't know you were that funny and creative at the same time. That's really a good one. Enjoy your wiggle. It brings up a whole new meaning. That's great. That's great.
Well, it's nice to get to know you, and I
Same
really
here.
appreciate your investing in me with this, and your taking the time to feedback what you have. Um, you know, Kevin said that you're a remarkable person, and I guess you are.
Well, he said the same thing about you, and he didn't tell me how I would know that. But I, obviously, being in your company for almost 2 hours now, I got to know you a little bit better. Clearly, the analysis brings up other things that I wouldn't have known had I not done that. But in terms of your being humanitarian and being authentic and acting in a way that's very consistent, it's always interesting when I find people that have such different backgrounds and training arriving at places I'm trying to help people get to. And it's because of the things that we're talking about that you use discovery decision making. It's not just your analysis. The scores are not looked at in terms of discovery decision making. It looks at your creativity and your grit and that kind of thing and risk taking. So in discovery decision making, you don't know what you don't know. You either learn it or you discover it.
Mhm.
And so part of my job is to help people become more aware of what they don't know
Mhm.
and try to teach them how to work on discovery. So I'll bring in Asian philosophy, Eastern philosophy. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say any longer. Can't say Chinese philosophy, I don't think. So it's one of those kinds. And so there's a lot of philosophy in working with high level performers. So my basic work is I do mind mechanics, teach people how to think differently, simply, and then I help them reduce more of the stresses in their life by trying to figure out what energies they're spending that are not effective. And then the last step in high level performance is what I would describe as spirituality. And it is looking at the essence of the being and what is fundamental in this that comes through us in everything that we do. And so there's a lot of what's called phenomenology and heuristic analysis, self guided, in trying to become aware. Now, you do that. You do that kind of in a spontaneous way.
Yeah,
So,
but I'm not a very highly spiritual person in terms of religion, although I was brought up in a church. Um, uh, that My mother was very religious, but my father wasn't. Um, but I have a very strong sense that there is a hand guiding my path from time to time. Synchronicity things have come along in my life that have just absolutely demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a force that's helping me when I need it most. And so I don't know how to describe. I don't call it God or whatever. But I do believe that there's something outside of what what I am that is looking out for me.
well, when I bring up spirituality, people will always say, "Well, I'm not religious," and I'll say, "Well, spirituality is both religious and non-religious." And so it's all based on a belief system, with the premise being that there is some essence that transcends and is at the core of your being that is a guiding force in what takes place. And so I explore that. I have a minor in theology as well, a minor in philosophy, major in psychology, all this kind of stuff. And so it's always thinking about things, but it's really kind of interesting to help people try to get closer to understanding what that essence is that continuously moves through them, that guides them. So that's what that's sort of like the three stages I go through with.
Uh-huh.
So
Neat stuff.
well, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed speaking with you, and whatever you can send me, about some of those articles would be great. And I'll get to know more about you and perhaps be able to help people understand that the stuff that you're talking about is so applied. And, it could be a really guiding force in people understanding how to perform at higher levels. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you for that.
I didn't get a chance to share much about the trust technology with you, but that's something that I could send you a video or two.
I would appreciate that and would look forward to speaking with you again when your time is available. You were brought into my life for a reason. I mean, not unlike this kind of guiding force. And Kevin wasn't very specific about why I would hit it off with you, but now I can understand more about that. So I
Did
hope
I
that
show
we.
you this? Did I show you this?
No, I have to get one of those though.
I'll send you one. Give me your address. I'll send you. I buy them by the hundreds because I
uh,
use them. This is the magic in understanding this and understanding how the leader's mind works.
right.
And understanding how to use this right is the key to trust.
Yeah. Well, just briefly, trust and faith, just so you hear my perspective on this. Trust is based upon proof, and it's based upon the past. Faith is a belief, like trust, no proof, no doubt, and future oriented. So if you can trust in your abilities to do analysis, be creative, intuition, and you have faith in yourself that no matter what you're experiencing, because it hasn't happened yet, you will continuously do what's necessary. And so it's an interesting description.
Mhm.
And so when you look at the definition of anxiety, and you look at the definition of faith, they say the following: expecting what hasn't happened yet to happen. And people that are anxious are worried about what hasn't happened yet will. And in faith, the belief is what hasn't happened yet will.
Mhm.
Very
Very
interesting
interesting.
process.
Nice juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. It's not mine. I wish I could be clever enough to put that together, but when I heard it, it was just so powerful.
Well, what I teach leaders to do is with the I am right button is to when people because I wear that if I every leader wears that button all day long
Yeah.
and they got to realize that they do. But they have to see the invisible button that another person's wearing when they challenge. If I believe I'm right, and if you say you don't agree, then by definition you're wrong, and my body language will show it like crazy, and I'll punish you. And what I teach people to do is to reinforce candor. So if someone is saying to you, I don't see it that way, you gotta instead of coming at them like this, you gotta come at them like this. Wow, that's interesting. Let's explore. You see it differently than me. And make sure that when the conversation's over, keep in mind, here's a person with a contrary opinion to mine. I make sure when that conversation is over that that person is glad they brought it up. That will build trust.
You're an applied psychologist, and your wiggle is really great. So keep wiggling, and that image now from outer space and the wiggle will have a whole new meaning for me. And so when I look at my wiggle, I'll tell people I'm not dancing. I'm just becoming.
Well, thanks very much, and we'll chat some
A
more. I'll send
pleasure.
you a package of stuff, and uh, we'll probably do another one sometime.
Thank you. I'll send you my address, and thanks for everything, Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Take care.
cheerio.
Bye bye.